How's everyone doing? Obviously, I can't look at the camera and drive, but midweek, I'm going to be teaching a CPR class that will start in the early evening. Before that, I'm going to meet some former co-workers. Yeah. How's everyone doing? I normally go through Course in Miracles. This right here. And here's one of the quotes. If you are trusting in your own strength, you have every reason to be apprehensive, anxious, and fearful. And then the Bible scripture I refer to is Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. So, some people have a problem with Course in Miracles. I basically get some Bible scriptures to line up with whatever I'm looking at. Here's another one. This is from, if you're not familiar with the NAP ministry, and this is called the Rest Deck. I'll show you what it looks like before I give the quote. Reclaim your right to rest. This is what, this quote is, I am magical and divine. And it says, you are exhausted physically and spiritually because the pace created by this system is for machines and not magical and divine human being. Your body has information to share with you, but you must slow down to retrieve it. There is power in knowing you are enough right now and always. So they have different quotes. I normally get one for each week. It's 50 in the deck. Rotate them weekly. Before I used to do them daily. Since I've gone through the deck a number of times, now for a while I was looking at a different quote each day when I first got the cards. And then I went to some point when I was using one quote for a whole month. Now I'm kind of switch them out every week. The other thing that I've been reading is the 48 Laws of Power. If you've ever dealt with someone with a twisted personality, especially if they're in the dark triad, this stuff right here is good information. They actually banned this book in prison because they don't want people with a twisted mind, potentially twisted mind, to get a hold of this. So law one is never outshine the master. Always make those above you feel comfortably superior. In your desire to please or impress them, do not go too far in displaying your talents, or it might accomplish the opposite. Inspire fear and insecurity. Make your master appear more brilliant than they are, and you will attain heights of power. Now, this is also known as manipulation. Now, I've never been really good at this. No. I'm not going to make my supervisor look bad, but I'm certainly not going to tolerate any foolishness or incompetence or any of the other things. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly, for they are easily aroused to envy. They also become spoiled and tyrannical. But hire a former enemy, and he will be more loyal than a friend because he has more to prove. In fact, you have more to fear from friends than enemies. If you have no enemies, find a way to make them. There's this story in here. I underlined some stuff. There was an emperor named Michael, and so he had a friend, Basilius. He loved him like a brother. So he chose, uh, ignoring the advice of those who recommended the much more qualified Bardas, Michael chose his friend. And then what happened, Basilius started to pour things into Michael's ear until the emperor agreed to have his uncle murdered. Now, his uncle was most likely a good guy and a confidant. So the first thing Basilius did was to get rid of Emperor Michael's truth teller. That's what people that are in the dark triad do. They isolate you. They isolate you. Now, Basilius' power and wealth grew, and a few years later, Michael, in financial straits from his own extravagance, asked him, Basilius, to pay back some of the money he had borrowed over the years. To Michael's shock and amazement, Basilius refused with a look of impudence. And then the emperor suddenly realized his predicament. The former stable boy had more money, more allies in the army and senate, and in the end, more power than the emperor himself. A few weeks later, after a night of heavy drinking, Michael awoke to find himself surrounded by soldiers. Basilius watched as they unlifed the emperor. Then, after proclaimed himself emperor, rode his horse through the street. This is the takeaway. Michael III staked his future on the sense of gratitude he thought Basilius must feel for him. Once Basilius was in power, anything he needed, it was best to give him, strengthening the bonds between the two men. It was only on the fateful day when the emperor saw the impudent smile on Basilius' face that he realized his deadly mistake. He had created a monster. He allowed a man to see power up close, a man who then wanted more. Basically, what happened was Basilius resented the help that he got from Michael. I mean, this could happen in all kind of situations. A man who wanted more, who asked for anything and got it, who felt encumbered by the charity he had received and simply did what many people do in this situation. They forget the favors they have received and imagine they have earned their success by their own merits. And that's how people that are narcissistic are. They'll come and get you to do a presentation or do research for them. They believe that they created the idea, and then they'll go present it at a conference. I have seen this so many times. And then these nurses came into this student health service and they did the presentation, and it was a beautiful presentation. And this narcissistic dark triad person, what they acted like it wasn't even good. Like, oh, go back to the drawing board and do some more research. Best believe that dark triad boss took that information and rolled it out into a presentation and took credit for it. They take credit for it, and it's going to a board of directors and all these other things. And I'll just say alleged, but it really isn't. I'm not saying the name of the school system. This is a saying from Voltaire: Lord, protect me from my friends. I can take care of my enemies. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but with narcissists is with narcissist people, and they will ingratiate themselves, and then if they are a Machiavellian personality, they are calculating. Like you're thinking something, they did something to you, let's just say in 2024, and they've been planning it since 2022. They don't mind waiting. That's why they don't want this book to go to people that are in prison and stuff. Um, I didn't say jail, I said prison. Okay. There's a difference. But I'm thinking of this dark triad boss I had. I was talking to some nurses the other day that I went out to lunch with. Um, and these are two nurses that had wrenches thrown in them being able to get promotions. And then Dark Triad hired a couple buffoons, and one of them was the sidekick that was always there when things were happening, like they were collecting things, seeing that I wasn't giving right information, that I wasn't supporting the staff, which is all not true. And just use documentation with the support of HR to create a PIP on me, letters of concern, all that I responded with an attorney. Um, but yeah, I think that that buffoon, that sidekick, that goon of Dark Triad really thought that she was going to get that promotion. But Dark Triad already had somebody in mind that she was going to already promote that was doing all the technology stuff in the reports because that's the original person one of the original Golden Children suggested, okay? No beef with the Golden Child, okay? They actually wrote me a letter of support that I appreciate. But she was up Dark Triad's behind until she retired and she didn't even end up getting the promotion. Best believe if we ever cross paths, which I hope we don't, but if we do, because it's a small world, I'm going to say, I thought you was going to get the promotion. Seemed like you was, whatchamahoo's Dark Triad's right hand person. Hmm, interesting. So I'll kind of go through some of the other laws. Law number 3 is conceal your intentions, which I think is very twisted. A lot of this stuff, I it's hard for me to wrap my head around this stuff because this is really counterintuitive to who I am. But if you're looking at the things that are going on in the world and the administration, I don't get into politics, you can really see a lot of this stuff. Conceal your intentions. Keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the purpose behind your actions. If they have no clue what you're up to, they cannot prepare a defense. Guide them far down the wrong path, envelope them in enough smoke, and by the time they realize your intentions, it will be too late. I have to say that when I was dealing with this dark triad supervisor, I always knew their intentions were bad. There would be moments where the person was charming, and I'm the type of person I would do my best to be cordial. But when it got towards the end, like that last school year, and I could really see all the paper trails and all the deceptiveness and all the back meetings and the calls and the new director that was sitting there supporting her, putting me on a PIP and plans and not stopping it. I already knew, and there was a director before that one that retired. I'm like, wow, these people were in on all of this stuff, whether they were doing it or they were being complicit. But I've always knew dark triads and intentions. So when it started to happen, it's like, oh, this is what I saw the whole time that everybody's saying that they don't see. Okay. And that's when I really just put the exit strategy into full force. Now, I was talking to a couple people yesterday that I used to work with, former coworkers, and there's this one nurse. She still will sit up there and talk to that person like they didn't screw her over. Somebody throws a wrench in your application to become a nurse consultant and you're still up there talking and smizing with them, There's another nurse. She was like, Danielle, I don't even talk to her. I act like that dark triad person isn't there. But this nurse is saying, I just can't wrap around my head that somebody would do all the stuff that you're saying that happened to you. I can't wrap my head around it because they seem so nice and charming. And that's part of it when somebody has that personality. They can, and you can look at them, you can look at their face every once in a while and see that their eyes, if they have like brown eyes, they were literally just turn black and dilate. And that's how this person's face would become. There would be a smirk and this like, there's something inside of you when you see it, it's there in other people. I call it the discernment of the Holy Spirit. uh, But some people choose not to see people. They can't wrap it around their head that someone could be such a twisted and evil person. So if you're that type of person, I mean, really, I would suggest you do this. Read this. I'm still in law too. I know I have a whiles to go, but I'll read some of the other laws that are in here, okay? So we talked about considering the intentions. Always say less than necessary. So this is one thing that narcissists and like people of the dark triad do too. They will withhold information. But the problem is if you're in the healthcare profession or a teacher, any kind of profession, but especially if it's you're dealing with people's lives and they withhold information and resources, that's a problem. When you are trying to impress people with words, the more you say, the more common you appear, and the less in control. Powerful people impress and intimidate by saying less. The more you say, the more likely you are to say something foolish. And so here's the thing. They hired this dark triad person, recommended this white nurse from this she was at a middle school and she's already, my understanding, she quit 2 months after Dark Triad left. And I always thought the reason that she hired this person was because the person was a complete like almost like the jester, like the I don't even know how Dark Triad would think that this person will be qualified, and I think that that's why she hired her because she really wasn't. Uh, there was way better qualified people, but part of it was she chose somebody that she didn't consider a threat because she's retiring and there's a promotion coming up, and she didn't want anyone that she sees as a threat because Dark Triad had already decided who she wanted to promote and everything. So, but I think sometimes the reason why that white nurse was hired was because there wouldn't be any possible racial discrimination. And then my understanding is another white nurse um, got hired and quit not long after. So they've had Dark Triad left, this other person retired, that was a nurse consultant. Then we had the white nurse that left 2 months after Dark Triad, and then apparently another white nurse started and quit. It was didn't even make it through the school year. So I think they try to select white nurses to kind of make it look like it's equal, but it's strategic. The thing about the nurses that I had lunch together with, one couldn't come because she was just coming from a trip from out of the country, is we're all outspoken and ask questions. And also, I was one of the last ones that really knew the history of the student health services. I knew a lot of the history. So this person, Dark Triad, the upline person, that's what I call her. You want to go? Go see your friend. she could say things that I know not to be true. And when I would bring it up, it would be like, "Oh, I don't like your tone. I don't like your attitude." Um, Things like that. And I would send that all to the attorney and stuff like that. So Doc Triad did put me on a PIP, did mark me down on my evaluation, and I considered messed up some of my career trajectory. Now, there's a number of counties that didn't ask the question if you've ever had a below standard or needs improvement evaluation. And there was only one county that did that. So, okay, baby, talk to you later. Have a great day. So, what I decided to do was I just challenged myself to apply for this job, and it was this county. And I did put in my resume, put all my letters of support in, and I did do the application, and it got to the question, why? And then yes. And then I said, please see the following YouTube channel. But I said, really, why am I doing this? Because I really don't want the job anyway. And this is just a way for me to prove that I'm not going to be intimidated. But I didn't want to go through the process of possibly getting rejected. So I felt like that would set me back. So I did withdraw the application. But the head person saw my resume and all the other stuff, but did see that I withdrew my application, but still had all the qualifications and gave me a call. So I said, yes, I did withdraw the application. This is someone I'm familiar with. I think that they would have taken all the things I said into consideration and at least offered me an interview, because they said that they were definitely interested in interviewing me, but they did not know about those substandard evaluations because I withdrew the application. Okay. Now I'm already gainfully employed. I regularly contribute to a school health Facebook group, and I have started posting in the school health space really largely things doing with organizing and good websites for information, what value it brings, and I've started to get more followers. And I'm like, okay, well, once I get a certain number of followers, I'll probably start doing some lives and just some things I learned during my time when I was there, working as a nurse consultant. So, but yeah, I withdrew it, and then I was like, I decided to apply, even though I didn't want the job, but to take back my power and to add to my story of letting go and healing. I don't want the job, but I didn't want the rejection if they said, no, we're not going to interview you because of the history of those substandard evaluations. Now, when they ask for the explanations, they want to know the ratings and exactly what was said. So I had no desire to go back and go rehash all that stuff out after I'd gone through all that healing. So anyway, I just put on here, I got a call even though I withdrew the application, and the person said, they would definitely want to interview me. We had already met before, even before I was doing school health through public health, because the nurses used to do the scoliosis screenings. So I had also met her at an event. Although I never attended any of the Georgia School Nurse conferences, because I always had the mindset, because the environment was so toxic. First of all, when I was on vacation, the last thing I wanted to be around was any of those nurse consultants that I work with, because was such a toxic environment, especially after some of the original nurse consultants retired. I didn't get to say everything I wanted to say when I got together with some of the nurses, but I think they got the gist of it, because when you're with a group, there's certain dynamics, and we had one person that talks a lot. And the funny thing is, she's like, I know I talk too much. I'm like, well, I said, at least you're self-aware. And yeah, so it was good.